do it under sort of late items to be introduced because I thought it was more important and more of the agenda than late items. So, apologies.
We have apologies for Stuart Green, Councillor Willoughby and Councillor Pearce. Thank you.
Thanks, Dom. As I say, there are no late items to be introduced. Any declarations of interest from members? No. Super. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January. Any items of accuracy that anybody wants to pick up? No?
Presumably the questions that were raised didn't come up with anything. The questions to the auditors. Nothing arose that we need to be aware of. I mean, I didn't think there would be, but I assume that. Do we not think that there ought to be a standing item on every agenda with external audit as a... Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Sorry, do you not think there ought to be a standing item on every agenda of external audit? You know, there isn't anything technically on the agenda this time. Just a thought.
I don't know, it's something that we can pick up at pre-meet or going forward for the next committee year. I'm not sure that they need to be... I mean, usually there's someone from external audit at every meeting, but there's not always something for them to say. But yes, they have usually attended at least. Any other items, Lucy?
May I just ask whether there was any update about Ada Bliss? There was due to be somebody coming back on that. I can't find the item now. I saw it a moment ago, it's moved.
I haven't had any update.
Page 5.
Thank you. I haven't had any update though. I've seen something about it. I think potentially on another committee. Have we had any update, Dom? Page 5 on Ada Bliss. So it's under internal audit progress report. So I suppose either you or Richard may have had. In fact, it does say head of internal audit would come back to members of the committee with the details. Sorry, Richard.
I've not had any details come back. I will chase it up.
Can they then be circulated by email to the committee so
Yes.
that this committee gets it? Thank you. Anything else, members? No? Thank you. So, item 5, Audit and Governance Committee outstanding resolutions. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Quite thin on the ground now, these resolutions, but just to run through them, in Appendix 1, as it says there, the item that was referred through to Audit and Governance Committee around SEND, the audit commenced in January 2022, and as you'll see from the progress report, we're at the end of February, we're 50% through the audit, so it's progressing, and hopefully we'll be at the June meeting, it'll be finalised and we'll be able to bring a report to that meeting. The other item that was raised in connection with the terms of reference at the January meeting, those items there, I'm currently starting to work on the committee work programme for 22-23. I should be talking to officers as to when the best time is to bring these extra 3 items. I've already had another item ready for the June meeting, which is the revision to the contract procedure rules, so that's already on there, and at the moment I'm just working through the June and July meetings, but I'll have to take into account as well, and have a chat with Simon about when we schedule things for external audit. The only other thing on there is the ongoing one about the political nature, and non-political nature of the meetings.
Which I am thankful I've not had to remind any member about while I have been chair. Thank you. Any comments? No? Super. So item 6 is the internal audit progress report, and that is you again, Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to give you a summary of the progress report that you have before you, planned progress is slightly below where I would have liked to have been at this stage of the year. By that I mean from inputs we had a target of getting 81.4%, and we're currently at 78.4%, so we're 3% below from the input from internal audit where I'd like to be. But if we take a look at the breakdown of where we are with the actual work, 63% of audits have been completed, with a further 7% where the field work's been completed, i.e. there's no more audit work to do on those, and they're now ready to go into the review process from the group auditors. 20% of work is still in progress, although the majority of it is, as you can see from the report, getting towards completion. It's over halfway complete. My concern is around the 9% where we've got allocated down, and you'll see some of them have got time against them as well. This is where these are audits that need to be moved on, but we're struggling to get buy-in from the managers or colleagues concerned who are dealing with all of that. The auditors have chased them. I've chased them. They're even ignoring me, which I just can't believe that. But so I should probably go for a wander around the council house after this meeting to see if I can find any of the culprits and spur them on to contact audit and get these audits underway. I mean, because at the moment we've got the scoping of these done, and we just cannot get any further with any agreement on those, and people are just not coming back to us. So I need to find out why they're not coming back to us. The good news is, since this report was written, you'll see that we've had on page 6 3 completed audits, and there's no issues that I wish to raise with committee through those. There's nothing that I think the committee needs to be aware of. But we have actually progressed some of the other audits as well. The boundary defence one has been issued in draft now. The leisure centres one I reviewed yesterday, so that will be going out in draft shortly. The Smart Park audit has been issued in final, and so too has the catering cash and bank audit. So things are moving on. It's since this report was written, which was probably a week or so ago, just over a week or so ago, things have moved on considerably. One of the other areas I'd like to raise with you is around recommendation tracking. We still have these 5 significant recommendations that are outstanding that have previously been reported through to committee, and committee have received updates from Doug Walkman, certainly on the bereavement services one, and at the last meeting you had Nigel Bryan talking to you about the bus station. The only other one is the neighbourhood boards, which again we allowed extra time because that's transferred from City Council to Derby Homes. Under the moderate recs, again, we've had some movement on those ones. The billing for home care, we've had an updated target date now of August of this year, and the agency spend recommendation has now been implemented. So at least a couple of things are moving on. Before I sort of hand over on this one, there's a couple of areas I just want to bring to the committee's attention that we've mentioned to you before in progress reports. One around the COVID-19 business support grant scheme, and the City Council has had an email from Bays to say that the pre and post payment assurance information has been checked by them, and for the 3 grants, the Small Business Grant Fund, Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant Fund and the Local Authority Discretionary Grant Fund, there's no substantive issues been identified. Therefore, there's no further action required by the City Council on those 3 grant funds. So they're happy with the pre and post assurance checking that we've done. So that's a good tick in the box for us there. The other one, if I take you back to the briefing you had from Andy Bramall and Mark Walker back in January about cyber security, the National Cyber Security Centre has issued some guidance around the Russia-Ukraine situation and the threat of cyber attacks, etc. We've checked with the City Council's IT team, and they feel that they've looked at this guidance and they think that they've already implemented areas of that guidance. There's nothing further to do. One of the things they are aware of from some security forums is that it has been said that the Russians have been targeting websites using denial of service attacks. The majority of the City Council's websites are protected against such attacks. So again, we feel that we're well protected there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Any questions from committee members? Lucy.
Yeah, thank you for that. I had two points really. One is about the in-house insurance claims handling on page 8. Oh, sorry, and what actually is happening on that? I can't find it now. It is easy with paper, you know. Which point was it I wanted to pull up?
Is that the plan report, Chair?
Oh, I think you're right. You're right. Okay. My notes are not on the pages, are they? The point on this one is the concern that you've raised about the lack of engagement when we're trying to do an audit. And I find that really quite worrying, because if people don't want to be audited, then they either don't appreciate the value of internal audit and they need some training, or they are overworked and feel it's going to take too much of their time, in which case the manager needs some training. So is there something more that we could do to unblock this route? And, you know, it may be that the chair of the committee needs to write to the relevant managers, or we need to engage with the correct directors or something, because it's waste of our audit resources if we can't make progress.
I agree with Councillor Kerr, Chair, on that one. One of the things is there is education. We've done, Martin Shipley and I have been out on a couple of occasions to do in sort of training sessions and workshops on internal audit. And when the managers have been on those, okay, we've done it to specific sections, they've suddenly realised the benefit and seen, you know, audit's not what they thought it was. And too many of them, too many people have still got, you know, the old view of audit that we're there to, you know, find fault. But once they realise the work we can do, and certainly we're getting good praise as well from the work that we've done with the contract management programme team. A few officers have come back to me and said, you know, that's great that all this data analytics, it's really helped us in things we're doing. So we're getting the message out there, but we do, I feel, from an internal audit point of view, we need to do some more to get the message out there. But yes, I do also agree that a note from the chair of committee to certain people might spur them on. It seems to spur them on if we ask them to come to meetings to explain where they are with recommendations. So it might spur them on to pick up the scope of the audit we've emailed them and have a look at it.
No, happy to do that, or something in conjunction with Simon, so that it's covered from both angles. But absolutely, I mean, this was one of the points that I was going to have was what can we do to help, because internal audit does add value, and if departments are concerned that you're only there to find faults, or, you know, because someone's tipped you off that you might find something if you look into something, they're going to be hesitant about welcoming you in. But as we have seen, it does add value not just to a specific department, but where those findings can be transferred across other places within the council. So absolutely, I'll speak to Simon afterwards and we can pick up who needs to be written to. Lucy, yeah.
I just feel that the reluctance to invite audit in is actually a really bad sign, and I think people ought to feel that if they don't want audit in, then they've got something to hide, not that they've got something to be proud about and can be open. So the more people don't want us in there, the more we ought to be there.
Thanks, Lucy. No, completely agree. Philip?
Just a couple of things. I probably missed it before, Richard. When you have your list of recommendation tracking, you've got assurance rating, you've got NAs. What's the NA applicable? Why is there not something on there? That's one item. And other one is, you mentioned denial of service attacks and things. You said majority of the council website were protected. So are there some which are not protected and should be? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The NAs are where we've not done a audit of, you know, like we'd normally do to get assurance on it. It's been areas where we've perhaps done consultancy work, or areas where we've just gone in there. I mean, it's still, the work we do still feeds into my knowledge for when I do my overall assurance, but it doesn't, we don't actually give it an assurance rating, but I have, there's elements in here that I think, well, that's something I need to remember, and I make a note of that for the assurancing. There's words, I've spoken with the chair as well about some of the things where, as auditors, we pick things up. We may not do audits about them, but we will also feed those into the annual opinion as well. So it's not like we're not just basing everything purely on audits. So there's several there that you're looking at, and a lot of those were areas where we're just doing consultancy work because there was issues raised by colleagues that they wanted us to come in and just have a look at things for them. So to give it an assurance would be wrong. I mean, we've done the work on it, so of course we're going to say it's got substantial assurance once we work with them on it. So, well, I'd hope we'd be saying that. And the other one about denial of service attacks and the websites, I will look into that, Philip. I've had that feedback from the principal IT auditor who said they'd said the majority, so there may be one or two, but I don't know. We have got quite a lot of websites. I mean, it might be the CMAP website, for example, that's not. But then again, would anybody be interested in doing a denial of service on that? I don't know if anyone ever looks at it, but I will find out what the proportion is of those that aren't covered.
And whether they should be, perhaps, you know.
Any other members? Any questions to Richard on item 6? No? Then item 7 is Richard again, Internal Audit Annual Plan Quarter 1 for 2022-23.
Thank you very much again, Chair. One thing I'd like to start off with by saying that I'm finding quarterly based planning I think it's working really well for Derby City Council. It's certainly making my audit life so much easier in that we're not trying to plan for the whole year ahead and then having to keep revisiting it every 5 minutes to change something and then come back to committee to say we've changed this and juggle things about, because we know that we can set quarter 1 up. We've got an idea of what we'd like to look at in quarters 2, 3 and 4, but it's rolling, so it's still rolling from quarter 4 of last year into quarter 1 of this year. So I think it works a lot better, certainly for an authority of Derby's size, and given the nature of Derby as well, with the being a unitary council with the different risks, etc. So it works much better. Whether it would work for other partners under CMAP, I doubt, but for Derby it does help us no end. As I say in the report, the planning process is taking into account the council's risk registers, not just the strategic risk register, but any directorate and departmental risk registers. We've looked at the council plan as well. Last year we used the recovery plan, this year we're using the council plan. Although we're not anticipating to do much work on those areas and outcomes of the council plan straight away, we're looking more at quarter 3 and 4 into next year for those as they progress. If we go in too early, we won't really add much value to it. We've looked at our own audit risk assessment, which is what we call the audit universe. We look at Derby City Council as an entirety and what areas are there under there. We do our own risk assessment to see, is there any areas there that aren't in the risk registers that we should be looking at. So that's hence why we've got that column there. And then the final one is the third parties. And what we mean there is such things as the contract management programme team have raised issues with us. We've had issues raised by councillors to us and also by other members of the Audit and Governance Committee, certainly the independent member, and we've tried to reflect that in there as well. And anything else where really we can, we look at what's happening at partner organisations as well, and there's anything manifesting itself there that could be a risk for Derby. And so we'll have a look at that and see whether that is something we need to bring into the planning as well. But I would say from my point of view to the committee, the key questions for you are, when looking at what we've presented to you, does it cover the areas you'd expect to see in there? Are there any areas you think that we may have overlooked? And again, that's something we can bring in quarters 2, 3 or 4. And any issues you may be aware of that would benefit from internal audit and assurance review, and anything that's come to, as we go through the year, if you could, contact me if anything comes up. I know certainly Councillor Kerr does come and see me from time to time with areas that she thinks that internal audit need to have a look at. So if I could encourage other members of the committee as well to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Any members of the committee have any questions now? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I've discovered what was wrong with my notes. I've got 2 questions about the plan, and I've got an overarching question as well from that prompt. On page 8, it talks about in-house insurance claims handling. Now, it appears that this is something that's being brought into house. I didn't realise that this was a change happening. Have we got a bit more background as to when it started, if it's just starting, you know, how it's being managed, are there more staff?
My understanding, Chair, is that it's going to be later this year. They've taken on a new insurance manager, and they're now working through this. They're looking to recruit within the legal department, where insurance sits now, to get some people in to do the claims handling. Claims handling has been one of those areas that we've always farmed out to one of the main insurance companies to do for us. In a lot of cases, a lot of the insurance claims don't actually hit the threshold, so we end up paying for them all anyway. The insurance company pays very little for, you know, it's under the claims. So it makes more sense that the money we pay them, we invest in our own staff to actually do the claims handling themselves. It is, we need to get all the systems set up, and the insurance system, from my days of working with it when insurance used to report through to me, you know, can handle all claims handling and that type of thing, so there's no problem there. So it's later in the year, and what we want to do as internal audit is work with legal as they implement it to make sure, you know, that all the necessary controls and risks are being implemented and properly mitigated. So it's not all, from my knowledge of claims handling, it's not always going to be as straightforward as just, you know, taking on internal claim handlers and off we go.
Thank you for that. On page 9, there is a comment about HGV drivers, which talks there only about recruiting and retaining. Aren't we doing anything about training, growing our own? And if so, shouldn't that be on the list as well?
If it's, I mean, that is something we can add into this audit anyway. I mean, at the moment it's just a title that's in there.
Okay.
For later in the year, it's something we need to just develop more.
And the overall thing I'm wondering whether we need to think about is how vulnerable we are to energy price increases, how we would manage that, and what we can do to mitigate it. Because that's the direction it's going in for, you know, there's so much talk about how it's impacting on households, and there's been highlighting individual companies, but we spend 5 million a year on energy, and it'll probably, if that doubles, that's 10 million next year, and that is a real risk.
I think Martin's going to come back to that one. Richard?
That really is a good question, Chair. I mean, it's one of those things that, one of the things we need to make sure as well is that the risk management group are picking up the risks around that as well, and we can pick it up through that point of view, but we can also put it in as part of our audit plan as well later in the year to see how it's being managed, how are people coping with that, and what are we doing around that, and again, bring assurance back.
As part of the contract management project group, we're going to be doing some analysis work on that to see if we can actually drive down costs and make some savings. Unfortunately, a lot of the commercial tariffs that you can be on, there's not necessarily savings to be had, so we will try and endeavour to do as much as we can, but it depends very much on what's out there at the time and what we can actually pull together. But yeah, it's on the horizon, and it's something that we are due to be looking into within the next few months. Well, imminently, but it's probably going to be a few months before there's obviously any actions coming out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Anything else, Lucy? Thank you. Any other members of the committee? Anything? Philip?
Just a couple of things. The fraud contingency, is that for doing things like if you get a tip-offs or anything like, or is it, are you actively going out to look at see whether any of the, I don't know, COVID grants have been granted correctly, and well, you got some dodgy people doing around there? Have you looked into that sort of thing? That's the one thing. I'm glad you're auditing the whole audit universe, but that's you know, it's perhaps a little ambitious for the whole universe. But just on the cost side of things, you mentioned that the cost 21/2 was 502,000 together with a one-off rebate of 121. So was the total cost 623 minus 121, or was it 502 minus 121.
If you take the 502 and add the rebate to it, that would be the total cost.
The total thing, yeah.
What's happened is that CMAP have built up a nice tidy little surplus each year, except for 1 year since its formation in 2012. And it was decided by the partnership board that a rebate would be given from the reserves to each of the constituent partners based on their years in the partnership, etc. So, of course, Derby got quite a hefty rebate compared to what the others got. But the idea was that we'd keep £100,000 reserved for any eventualities, but also an earmarked £80,000 for any IT developments within internal audit. So the reserve should be around the 180,000 mark now. It had crept up to about 350,000 at March 21. Do you want me to pick up on the fraud element that Philip mentioned as well? Yeah, we try to have a fraud element of all audits anyway. When we're looking at audits, and we are looking around the controls, and is there opportunity for fraud there? Therefore, we will try and minimise it that way. We work very closely with the corporate fraud team, Tracy Thomas's team. They are quite reactive in their the way they work, picking things up. We are trying to do proactive work in doing training on fraud. But the other area this contingency picks up on is fraud risk assessments and that type of thing. And one of the things I'm working on at the moment with Sarah Walker's team is putting together a fraud risk assessment for the council. I do a fraud risk assessment for myself for when we're doing audits, so we've got ideas, but we need the council needs to do its own fraud risk assessment to make sure and take that then through the risk management group, which is what they're doing. So there's elements of that in there. And of course, any work I do around fraud where things are referred through to us comes out of that contingency as well. I mean, there will be occasions where we suddenly go, and certainly the cash handling type things are looking, could fraud and theft be happening there? So that's why we pick up on those. And a few of the establishment visits we do are looking for, is there vulnerability there to fraud? So we do some proactive work, but not as much as we used to.
Thanks, Richard. Does that answer your questions, Philip? Yep, super. Anything else from anybody else? No? Okay, so item 8 is accounting policies 21 to 22. Pete, is that you?
So my report covers the adoption of the accounting policies for 21-22. There's been no changes to the accounting policies again for this year. Myself and the team have been through to ensure that they're compliant with the SITFA code, which I can report that they are. As I say, there's no changes to be made. However, the committee does still need to review and adopt these accounting policies. The only caveat I would put on about no changes is, as Simon alluded to at the start of the meeting, there's this national issue around highways assets, which may or may not require a change to accounting policies once SITFA have made their decision. But I've included a recommendation at 2.2 that any changes be delegated to Simon and reported back to the committee in due course.
Thanks, Pete. Lucy.
Thank you. At the final point on the internal audit progress report, it says that on page 16, one relates to the taxation audit where debtor invoices were being written off too late to be eligible for VAT bad debt relief. Now, I've no idea how much VAT bad debt relief we were not able to claim, but is that something that we need to consider as part of our accounting policy?
Not as part of the accounting policies, because debt write-off isn't covered by that. That's more of a sort of a debt recovery policy, I guess, and the timescales that we write those debts off. That's not covered by accounting policy.
Any other comments or questions from members? No, just you then, Philip.
On the accounting policies, there's a new one coming in on leases, isn't there? But is that 22-23, or is it not come in yet?
It's recently been announced that it's going to be delayed till April 2023,
23.
subject to confirmation by the Financial Reporting Council. was it?
FRS, isn't it? Yeah, I think, yeah, yes.
So that they won't give their confirmation till April, but all likelihood, I think it is going to be delayed.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else coming along the way? I don't think there is.
No,
there?
it's just IFRS 16.
That's the only one I was aware of.
Yeah, that's the big change.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Okay, so recommendation is at 2.2 that members delegate to the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources the authority to make new accounting policies and amend existing policies. Are we happy to go with that recommendation? Everybody is happy to go with that recommendation. Thank you, Peter. We will now take a slight interlude because Linda is on her way to discuss contract waivers, but she has a message to say she is on her way, so she's only got 2 floors to come down, so hopefully she won't be long. But hopefully there will be lots of lovely questions for Linda on contract waivers, having had some excellent training on it just a few months ago. Lucy.
I just wondered in this interlude whether anybody had any idea about how much money is involved in this loss of VAT through debt write-offs.
We can come back to you on that. Obviously, it's not a figure that we have immediately to hand.
That's fine. And if it is a significant amount, whether it's a policy within the debt handling policy area, we need to review.
We'll have a look at it, and Pete will go and produce a note for you in the next few days.
Lovely. Thank you.
I just wonder while we wait for Linda whether we move on to item 10, save the radio silence on the screen. So item 10 is the Internal Audit Charter, which I believe will be Richard again.
It is, Chair. Thank you very much. This document has in the past been an appendix to the audit plan, and therefore has on occasions sadly been overlooked or given minimal attention to what we'd like to. We'd like to boost it up, and so this is it is an important document because it's a requirement of the public sector internal audit standards at 1000, and defines internal audit's purpose, its authority, its responsibility, and so on. The charter is one we take to each of the partners. So some lucky people like Councillor Kerr will have seen it when in its guise at Derby Homes. However, I've made a slight amendment to the Derby one to what goes to other partners to reflect the fact that we've got quarterly audit planning process here at Derby. So that's in there. Otherwise, it's a consistent document across all of the partners and goes to all their audit committees. But it's really there just for you to have a look at and to say whether you're happy or not with it.
Thanks, Richard. Lucy?
And as Richard says, I do the Derby Homes audit situation as well, where we have a 5 or 10 minute meeting before all audit meetings, where we meet just with the internal audit team. And it's referenced in here that it's good practice to do that, it's what we should be doing, but we don't have an opportunity to do that. So it's something where the Chair, I thought that we maybe ought to consider talking to probably Democratic Services about and getting it implemented for the new municipal year. To have a meeting set up only if somebody on the committee particularly wants to raise something, or if internal audit want to particularly raise it, would set, it could scare things. So I just think it's something that we ought to set up in a formal, regular, every time way, so it's there as an opportunity if we want to use it.
In the same way as we mentioned earlier about not just inviting them in when we think there might be an issue.
Yes, yes. The other thing I was going to say is on the QAIP section, we're inconsistent about how we spell programme as to whether it's an IT programme or a programme of activity.
I will correct that, Councillor Kerr. Thank you for that. Can I just pick up on the other item that Councillor Kerr mentioned as well? It was something that Councillor Willoughby, in his time as chair, was trying to push forward, and it was advised by the head of legal that it didn't sit well with transparency, etc. So it might be something you wish to take up with legal. But I know there are, I mean, it's one of the things that the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy push, you know, that you should have these meetings. It's in their guidance on audit committees. And also there are a lot of other authorities that do so. So it's might be something that's worth picking up again.
Do the rest of the committee have a view either way, whether you would like us to pursue having that sort of drop-in session before a committee, or whether we go with previous legal advice? I assume that the legal advice we would get now would be from the same person that we got it from last time, so that legal advice would probably be the same.
I'm not sure it would be from the same person, to be honest. I think the legal advice before was fundamentally flawed and was wrong, personally.
I think we might have had legal advice in the last couple of years, Philip, which might have been not as flawed as others. Some legal people are. Maybe we should ask a different legal person. Simon, would you like to put us out of our misery on this?
Lawyers are only ever right 50% of the time, aren't they?
Yeah. I think in essence, it is good practice as set down in the audit, good practice for audit committees that members of a committee should have the opportunity, it's often at the end of a meeting, that if they wanted a private session with any of the internal or external auditors, that they can have that opportunity without other statutory officers or other officers in the room. In most councils I've worked, that actually isn't required because the areas will have been raised in full open and open session, but it is good practice. So if necessary, as a strategic director, I can have a word with Emily Feenan about that, and maybe we can look at it for the new municipal year about whether we need to build that in, as if you want to call it, a final item on the agenda, because inevitably what we need in local authority meetings is to start at the time that the meeting is published, and that's quite important. So I'd suggest at the end of the agenda the opportunity is given if you do so wish.
Committee views? Do we want that? Do we want Simon to speak to Emily with the view to adding that as an item to the end of the agenda of future meetings? Yes, yes, yes. Yes, Simon, would you be able to do that, please?
I can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything else on item 10 before we move on to waivers? No? So are we happy to, we have reviewed, are we happy to approve the internal audit charter? Yes, there are nods. Super. Then yes, thank you, Richard. Linda, thank you for joining us. We will take item 9, contract waivers for the period 1st of October to the 31st of December.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give an overview of what the report says, the number of waivers is reduced, which is obviously good news. And I think that really can be attributed to the Working Smarter programme that we've got, particularly the contract management, because we're making people more aware of the contracts, and we've been alerting people to perhaps contracts coming to an end or requiring review. So in that instance, it's made a real difference to the number of waivers that we've received. Only one item this time related to COVID, and that was the staffing for a testing centre. Obviously, nothing could be done about that. And The majority of the waivers this time have been where we haven't got time to do a process because we've receiving funding, and that funding has got a spend limit time scale on it, and we've not been given the opportunity to have enough time to do a process and then spend the money. I've not given particularly enough detail on the last item of the report, which is the rough sleeper item on there. So I've actually brought along more information with me, and this is actually a grant that we have to spend, but just so that you're aware, we received the notification that we'd been successful on the 5th of November, but the actual funding was deemed to have started on the 1st of July. And so obviously that would have been our procurement period, and so we had to go ahead with a direct award so that we could take the benefit of the funding, and you know, and it's the management coordination of rough sleeper drug and alcohol treatment, which is obviously important to the city, and so that's why that being the largest value there is because of the value of the grant that we were given. The other thing I will highlight is that the first item, Dragon Gate, which is mentioned, which are the consultants that we did a waiver to use, that those are the consultants that are working with us on becoming the home of the Great British Railways. So obviously that's something we had to move quickly on, and that was the reason for that waiver. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Linda, and thank you for the extra detail. Questions? Councillor Kerr?
I was interested in the contract for maintenance services for the Longbridge hydroelectric power plant, because I think it's got the way the explanation goes here, it seems to have wider implications. It seems that we've expected a spend, and tell me if I've got this wrong, we've expected a spend, we've not spent it, but because we've not spent it, we are somehow tied in with them still? Have I got this wrong? And if we have, then it sort of suggests that we shouldn't anticipate spending more than, we shouldn't budget to spend more than we realistically can, and then to add on later, or maybe that's wrong as well.
Happy to explain, Councillor Kerr. When we estimate the value of a contract that we place, this contract covers both planned and reactive maintenance. So we can put in a fairly confident figure on the planned maintenance, but with regard to the reactive, we don't know because we've not yet had to react. And so that we don't fall foul of the procurement regulations, we obviously have to put a valuation on that we won't exceed, otherwise we're falling foul of the regulations. So in our estimate, when we put the value of the contract out, which included the reactive, we obviously haven't done as much reactive, may not even have done as much planned due to COVID, but because of that underspend, we were in a position to negotiate with the provider to say, we've underspent, obviously, you know, we are happy to continue with you, we work well with you, and they've agreed to extend the contract at actually no increase to the rates, which, given where we are, is actually a contract saving, although it doesn't look like it is on paper because we're spending the same amount of money, or expect to spend. That, of course, will be down to what reactive maintenance we have to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes sense. It isn't an example of something bigger. It's the negotiation, and we're presuming that any other, if we had gone out to the market, other costs would be more likely to have risen than to have held steady since we had the last time of testing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Any other members, any queries on any of those waivers? No, I think you have provided sufficient detail, Linda, thank you. And the Working Smarter clearly is working and clearly helpful to the people who are dealing with those contracts, and undoubtedly helpful to you and your team, who are probably spending a lot less time running around in circles and tearing your hair out. So, excellent work. Thank you.
Asking different questions, I think, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So, item 11 is the exclusion of press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following items: that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 7 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are we ending the broadcast, Dom?